So, Don, before I met you, the other close friend, role model that I had was my uncle, and his name was Don as well. Called him Uncle Don.
Bless his heart.
He was a good man, and I really became close with him when I moved to Texas in 2001 to go to college at TCU. Because before that, he had lived in Edmonton.
Oklahoma?
That's Edmond.
Oh, okay.
Edmonton, Alberta.
Okay.
So he lived up in Canada, and I grew up in Tulsa. So I didn't see much of the guy. Never got to really know him, and wasn't very close or anything. And he never had any kids. He and my aunt never had any children. But I started running into him when he started his own business in the late 90s and was driving all around the United States.
Right.
Selling tank gauges. So it would tell you how much fluid was in the geometry of your tank.
Oh, okay.
And he came up with some technology with a partner of his in Edmonton. And the partner Edmonton came up with technology and the development of it, and then he was the salesperson in the United States.
Gotcha.
And that's the business they grew, and they did that for 20 years, from like 97 to 20.
Are we talking
18?
about large tanks like?
Yeah. So oil tanks out in a field,
refineries and that kind of stuff.
oil tanks driving down the road, tractor trailers, and gas. Those big oil tanker trucks and RVs.
Wow.
He could do not just oil, but sewage or fluid or any kind of large tank that you needed accurate readings on.
Oh, well.
Their technology would do it, and it could do it digitally, and it could communicate.
We probably had one of his gauges on our bus.
It's possible. Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, that technology didn't come out until the late 90s. So.
Oh, okay.
But anyways, he drove around in a camper. I remember he came through Tulsa in 1997 in a camper, and he slept in the back of the camper. And he came upstairs. We were on the third floor of this apartment complex, and he showed us how the float worked and how it would send readings to the gauge. And anyways, it was all over my head, but he was a nice guy,
right?
And a little bit socially awkward and diffident,
right? But
very friendly. But he wouldn't come up and he wouldn't put his arm around you and say, "Don Miller, good to see you." He'd probably just be like, "Hey, Don, hi." Like
right.
kind of bashful,
right.
kind of shy, but he was a good man. He was very smart. He was a mechanic by trade. And after he moved to Texas, I got to know him, and only until he passed away in 2020, 3 years ago. And my aunt told me that he hit a low point in his life. In the early 80s, he had worked at a motorcycle dealership in Edmonton. He was in charge of the parts department and the service. And something happened where I guess the economy got pretty bad in the early 80s,
right,
in the United States and Canada.
Yeah.
It was pretty bad.
Yeah,
so what happened was the bank changed the terms of collateral for the dealership, and you were no longer allowed to use your inventory on the floor as collateral. That was considered something else. They changed the accounting terms overnight, and it made them insolvent, and they were shut down immediately. Right. From one day to the next, a new regulation came in, out of business.
Wow.
So this was something he had been building since the early 70s, I think. So after 10, 11 years, he came home, and my Aunt Shirley, she was a flight attendant for Air Canada, and she worked at the airport. And so she had a solid job, and, so she was working every day and at the airport, and Uncle Don was working at this dealership, and she came home from work, and he came home from work, and he said, "Well, this is all I have left." And he had $10,000 cash. He said, "I think I'm going to go to the high-level bridge and jump off."
He was serious.
Yeah. And so my Aunt Shirley said, "Well, can you leave the $10,000 before you do?"
Are you going to take it with you?
She's a kidder. But she went and hid all the shotgun shells to his gun in the house.
So she took it.
She took
literally
them, hid them, because once she heard him say that, he realized he was at the end of his rope.
Right.
But from that, he climbed out. He went out and tried to do insurance sales for a year or two. That didn't really work too well. He tried to buy trucks in the United States and sell them in Canada for a higher value and live off the arbitrage. He did that for a little while. And then he got into this business, which he started with a partner with just from scratch. Anyways, he retired a multimillionaire.
Wow.
He only got to enjoy retirement for 1 year before he passed away. Like you could see, he was aging dramatically.
Right.
He went on a trip with my aunt to Alaska. They bought a new Ford truck and put a camper in the back, and they went up to Alaska. It was a dream of his. He always wanted to go up there and ride the Alaska Highway and drive all the way up through Canada. So they were gone for 3 or 4 months, but we would talk on the phone throughout their trip. And when he came back, I was just so concerned about how tired he looked. And he looked like he had aged 5 years. Well, when he passed away 6 months later, it's like, okay, his heart was giving out.
But did he know he had this problem?
No. I mean, he had diabetes his whole life. So Uncle Don always had health challenges. But that didn't stop him, man. Like, this guy would ride around on a motorcycle. So I bought a motorcycle when I moved out here.
Right.
So I could ride with him. That's why I'm out here.
Oh, okay.
I moved to Granbury so I could be close to him. Because he was my closest family
So
in
he
Texas.
lived here in Granbury?
Yeah. They moved out here in 97, and they my aunt's still here.
Oh.
But they built their business here. And I'm sure you met him. You probably just didn't know. Probably you crossed paths with him at some point. Granbury's a small enough town.
Yeah.
But he was the reason I moved out here, and we'd go ride motorcycles. Man, he would go 130 miles an hour, and all I would smell is gas. He'd be off like a shot. And I'm thinking, how the hell is this 70-year-old man driving like a bat out of hell with diabetes? We stopped to get gas, and he's taking his injection. I'm like, this guy has no fear. No fear.
Well, if you live long enough to be 70 years old, what's left to fear?
Man, he died in his rocking chair with his wife by his side.
Oh, wow.
So he died as gracefully as possible.
Oh, that'd be the way to go.
But he was my closest friend. And when I heard that story after he passed, how he came that close to just ending it, I was blown away. I thought, wow, Uncle Don turned it around in his mid-40s. I think he was actually almost 50 because he was born in 46.
Okay.
And you were born in 47.
So he's 1 year older
and
now.
he started that business in 1996. So he was 50. And his most successful years and his happiest years were after 50.
After 50. Well, I can kind of relate to that.
I know. I think your story is. I mean, we've talked about your advent and coming up from nothingness and taking chances and becoming a really successful farrier, and then getting into the music business and being successful at it. And just like ebbs and flows of the ocean, right? Like
right.
You had your high points and your low points.
Well, I think everybody's got their high points and low points, My life's probably no different from most people's, but when I'd quit Reba and came home, I decided that, first of all, I had to decide what I was going to do, because like I took the job with Red, I untook the job with Reba. And there were some things going on behind the scenes that troubled me. It troubled me on the way things were turning out on her career. I wasn't afraid that she wasn't going to make it, but there's other outside influences that wasn't happy with me being there. So I decided, you know what? There's one thing I can fix, and that's not be here. So then that way it won't interfere with her career. And she never knew about this. The day I quit Reba, she don't know why I quit her. I just quit. But the and I hated to quit because I was watching this young person blossom, and she would ask me when she'd go out with Red. She'd ask me. She said, "Do you think that I can do this?" And I'd always tell her, "You're a superstar. You just don't realize it." And well, I'm glad you got that kind of confidence. It wasn't my confidence that made me tell her that. It was her confidence that made me tell her that. Because from my position and the experiences that I had, when you go see an artist and another artist is there, when the people walk away talking about the artist that's not the headliner, I don't know who that girl was, but man, she could sing. I don't know who that girl was, but she was pretty and she could sing. So when you hear this, and of course, Reba didn't hear what I was hearing because she was signing autographs or was occupied by other people in the crowd. So, and I thought, you know what, to be a part of this is amazing. To see what's taking place, and she's not even aware of it. Anyway, I was in the middle of a conflict between some of Reba's people and myself. So the best thing for me to do in order to really help Reba would be just step away. And that's what I did. Then I came home. My wife, at the time, my wife had been encouraging me to get off the road because she was in real estate. So she wanted me to, and she knew that I knew construction. So she wanted me to start remodeling houses and doing that kind of thing. Then she would buy the good buys, and then I could fix them and we could sell them. We became a team, basically. So anyway, I came home and we talked about it. And I said, sure, I'm not doing anything else, but I'm still going to be involved with music somehow. But if this is what's going to take place, then let's just go for it. So the first house that I had acquired was in kind of southwest Fort Worth.
Okay.
And it belonged to a friend that my wife knew as a child, and she was up in years and she wanted to sell her house. So I went by and looked at it, and I told her, I said, well, it's pretty bad shape. It was run down, and it was in the Poly area of Fort Worth, which was not the best area in town. So I asked her what she wanted for it, and she said, well, I'd like to have at least $7,000. So I bought the house and went down to the First National Bank of Texas and asked the president of the bank if he would make me a loan on fixing the house up. And he said, well, I'm not quite sure that I can do that because I've only known you as a musician or in the entertainment field. So I'm not quite sure that it would be a safe bet on me loaning you money as a contractor because I don't know that you know anything about construction. And I said, well, you rest assured I do. So he said, have you got a savings account? I said, I do, matter of fact. And he says, okay, I'll loan you the money against your savings account. You can leave your savings account unattached, and I'll loan you the money, but if anything goes wrong, then
Collateral.
I'll have collateral. And I said, whatever makes you happy, that's fine. But I said, I'm not going to fail. And he said, well, there's always possibility that you're going to do that. So he reached in his drawer and he took out a stack of envelopes about that tall, and he set them up on top of his desk, and he said, here's all the people that said they were in construction business that was going to make things happen. Well, this whole row of files right here, nothing's happened.
Oh, no.
And these are foreclosures. So I don't want you to be a part of that.
Yeah.
And he said, I said, okay, that's fine. I'll agree. So anyway, I went ahead and started in construction with with my own money, but his help. Okay. So
And that grew and grew and grew.
it did. It grew and grew and grew. That project turned from 6,000, and I sold it for 40,000 about 4 weeks later.
Wow. That's
So,
a pretty good return,
a
Don.
great return. And when I went back into the bank to pay the loan off, he looked at me and he said, hey, you know that stack of stuff I had on the table? He said, I want you to go through there and see if there's anything you might be interested in.
Oh.
So I had an insight immediately.
So that's where you got your future leads from?
Yes, yes.
His stack of non-performing loans?
Right. So I'm not quite sure he was doing the legal thing, but he was thinking, okay, if he can do this,
He can help the bank.
right.
He was looking out for himself. He wasn't trying to help Don Miller.
Let this guy take a look at some of the things I have. Maybe he might be interested. And I did. I bought about 15 or 20 of them. But
And you went in and fixed them all up?
I went in, fixed them up.
And rented them out, right?
Rented them. Started renting them. And my wife, as I say, she was in real estate. So in the meantime, Johnny Duncan had called me and wanted me to work with him a little bit. He found out that I'm no longer a Thureba. And he said that he'd like for me to work with him a little bit. So I said, okay, but I'm kind of busy in the construction. But if I get an opportunity and you need me for something, I'm sure I could take off a day or two and we can go do our thing. So anyway, the house industry became more and more and more and more. And I was very fortunate. I was getting them fixed and getting them rented and having an income, so I wasn't no longer having to borrow any money.
Right, big cash flow at this point.
Yeah, big cash flow. So, and they weren't
Like more money than you'd ever made
well in anyone
working as an
venue.
entertainer.
Yeah.
Working, driving the
Yeah.
bus and all.
Right.
Right. We're talking you're on another level of income now.
Oh yes, another level of income. So I had no worries. But there's one thing that I'd taken and had done while I was on the road, which I didn't undo. I had signed the power of attorney over to my wife. So even though I was putting money in the account and
But the reason why you
take
did
care
that,
of-
you told me, it made good sense.
yes. The reason I did that was because anything could happen when you're on the road. You get killed, and we had some investment properties, and I wanted her to be safe and comfortable with anything that might have taken place. Because you never know when you're traveling like that plane crash or car wreck or, you know.
Or you're out of pocket for a few days.
And she's needing to do something.
Something quick.
Right. So I gave her the power of attorney, and I didn't undo that, which was my mistake. It's a big mistake on my part.
Well,
But nevertheless, I wasn't thinking of those terms.
sure.
So the years that I'd been traveling on the road, that her and this guy that was an attorney had became friends, and she relied on him a lot about business avenues and that kind of stuff. And I think he relied on her a lot about what was taking place on my side, which was unbeknownst to me that the conversation was ever coming about. But anyway.
It wasn't presented to you either.
Right, no. I'd wound up with 85 rent houses is what I wound up with. And I'd bought a little place out in Azle, Texas. And it was an old dairy barn. And I was turning it into a house. and it was kind of unique deal. And
Another fixer-upper, right?
another fixer-upper. Yeah, well, it was straight out across a dairy barn. It was still a dairy barn when I bought it. So I was going to turn it into a home and a house. And Hazel it was growing leaps and bounds at
Was
that
it
time.
even back then?
Yeah, it was. It was.
I mean, it's exploded now.
Oh yeah, but it was beginning to explode at that time. And I'd lived in Boyd before, and we had a restaurant over in Boyd. So a lot of the people from Hazel would come to that restaurant and eat. So I had an insight on what things was taking place in Hazel and how fast it was growing. So this old farmer came in one day to the restaurant, and he told me about that he's going to sell his place. And he was just on the outskirts of Hazel, and he had about 6 acres with it. And he'd sold the rest of it off, and they'd building houses all around him. And so I go out and look at it, and it's something that I think that, okay, this is going to be cool. I can turn this into a pretty good little project. So I'm out there working, me and Ricky Solomon. Ricky Solomon was a fiddle player for Red, and me and him became real close friends. And Ricky he'd been in construction before he ever went to work for Red. So he knew what he was doing, and he liked working with me, and he liked the things I did, like taking these old barns and that kind of stuff and turning them into something that was worthwhile rather than tear them down. And he was standing there, and that particular morning he came to me and he said, "Who do you know drives a Cadillac?" And I said, "Well, I know a lot of people drive a Cadillac." A lot of people. I said, "I happen not to be one, but..."
That happened to be a prestigious automobile
Yes.
at the time.
Yes, it was. If you had a Cadillac, you was up in the
This is
rafters.
before Lexus
Yes.
and
Yes. You was up in the rafters.
Yeah.
So I looked out and I said, "I don't know who that is." So he said, "Well, they've been sitting out there for a while." And I said, "Well, I wonder what they want." And he said, "I don't know, but it's your property. You probably need to go check." So I go out, and it happens to be the banker, the guy that I borrowed the money from to start with. And he asked me, he said, "Are you and your wife having any kind of problems?" Right off the bat. Well, I'm sure the look on my face was like, "What the hell are you talking about?"
Yeah, that's a
Right?
pretty bold statement from your banker.
Yeah. And I said, "No, first of all," I said, "What are you doing here?"
Yeah.
That's the first thing I said. And he said, "Well, I've got a question I've got to ask you." And that's when he said, "Are you and your wife having any problems?" "No, not that I know of. You know, we had coffee this morning at breakfast, so what's the deal?" He said, "She came in yesterday and closed down all your accounts." I said, "Do what?" He said, "She closed all your accounts out. And they brought the files to me in my office. And I just wondered if there's something going on between you and her. Or why would she be changing banks? Or why would she be closing the accounts out? Are you not happy with our bank?" And I said, "Bill, I have no earthly idea what the hell you're talking about." And he said, "Well, you have several houses that has been mortgaged to the hilt at our bank. And your wife and an attorney has borrowed lots of money. So a lot of these houses that you may think that are free and clear are several months behind on payments. And don't want you to worry about it right now. What I want you to do is go home and talk to your wife. See what's going on. See if there's anything that's taking place. It don't look good from my side."
The wife who you had just had coffee with that morning.
That's right. That wife. And I'd been married to 17 years. So I go home. When I get there, there's nothing there. There's all the furniture's gone. Even dishes in the cabinet is gone.
Don, how did she know that that conversation had taken place? How
Well,
did she know to split that day?
I think it was pre-planned. I think that the day before she'd closed everything out, she knew that I was going to find out pretty quick because me and Bill were pretty close.
And she
The
just
president of
played
the
it
bank.
off.
Yeah. And we had coffee, and she was talking about her day, and I was talking about mine. She was asking me how the barn was going, and I was telling her. And I told her, I said, whoops, I got to go to work. It's time for me to get out here and go.
And you came
And
home.
when I came home from after Bill's
House
visit,
is empty.
the house is empty.
Wow.
No sound over anywhere. So I was in shock. So first thing I do is call 911 because I felt like somebody come in and robbed the house. Now here's my mindset at that time.
Yeah, something bad has happened.
Somebody's come in and robbed the house and something happened to her.
Yeah, kidnapped or something.
Right, or
Yeah.
whatever. So anyway, they came out and they said, well, what age is she? And I told them, they said, you can't file a missing person report on somebody that age for at least 24 to 48 hours. So my hands were kind of tied at that time. So I thought, well, all right, I'll go to the bank and talk to the banker. So I go to the bank and he said, did you and her have a conversation? And I said, nobody there to talk to. I said, no, she's gone.
No note.
No note. No kiss my butt. Talk to you later.
Closet's empty.
Yes. Only thing that was in the house was my clothes.
Wow.
That's it.
That's all she left.
That's all she left. And that's probably not her size. You know. So anyway, he reached in his desk drawer and he handed me an attorney's card. And he said, you need to go down and talk to this fella. And I was sitting there in tears. And I said...
and how old are you at this point, Don?
I was
Are you my age? You're in your 40s?
No, I wasn't quite 40 yet.
Not even?
Probably 38, somewhere in that area. About 38. So he said, you're never going to make enough to come out from under all this. You're never going to do this. So I want you to take this card, and I want you to go down and talk to this attorney and take his advice. Just take it. And whatever he tells you, you just stick with it. So I go down and I talk to the attorney. And of course, it was a couple of days later because I kept thinking that everything was going to be okay. Right?
That you'd hear from her.
Yeah, I would hear and something would happen. But in the meantime, I got no sleep. I drove the streets at night looking for a vehicle and everything I could to find her. So a couple of weeks after that, I talked to the attorney.
But we got to tell the people where she was because you found out later.
Yeah, I found out later where she was.
You were out driving the streets looking for her.
Yes.
And she was in Hawaii.
This was a couple of weeks later when about 2 o'clock in the morning, I was sleeping on the floor in the same house that she had left. So about 2 o'clock in the morning, I got a knock at the door. So I get up and I go I go to the door and there's 2 police officers at the door.
Yeah, now you must be thinking the worst.
I am really panicking now. And he said, "Hey, it's cool. It's good. Don't panic. We found her car at DFW at the airport. And we found her. She's in Hawaii with an attorney." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, she's safe. She's safe. No harm has come to her. So just wanted you to know, we did locate her, and we know where she is, and she's healthy. She's fine."
Did they give you a number or anything? Or
No.
They weren't allowed to?
No. Well, I don't know what the circumstances were, but I asked the police officer, I said, "What can I do at this point?" He said, "Well, Mr. Miller, I think if I was you, I would be trying to just hang out and wait and see what's taking place. So I go to my attorney the next morning, the one Bill sent me to, and I told him, I said, well, I got a visit last night from the Fort Worth Police Department, and they told me they had found her, and she was in Hawaii with another guy. And
God.
what I need to do. He said, well, let me see if I can reach her. And I guess he had enough contact with, and
He got a hold of her.
yeah, he knew where she was.
Yeah.
So anyway, he located her, and a couple of another weeks went by, and I was wondering what the hell was taking place.
Well, now at this point, Don, like your bank accounts are frozen, right?
Oh yeah, I have no money, none. The only thing I have is whatever people has owed me, and I had to go to try to collect that from them because all my accounts have been closed. Right.
So you've been turned upside down in a day.
Right. So I go to Bill at the bank and I asked him. I said, you know, I'm kind of in dire shape here.
Oh yeah.
The only income I have is whatever the people owe me for at this particular moment, and some of them can pay me, and some of them can't. So, what I need to do? And he said, well, I didn't say this, but you probably need to collect from the people that owe you, and just try to survive. Well, that tells me don't put it in the account. So, and my attorney had told me, he said, there's nothing I can do, and these people are going to come after you.
The creditors?
The creditors. They're going to come after you because you owe Boise Cascade several $1,000s. And your creditors are going to file a lawsuit.
Now, you guys she had power of attorney. Wasn't it a joint account? Wouldn't she also have exposure?
I didn't have the joint account with her. Now, I had an account that was in my business account.
But she wasn't part of the business.
Yes, she was.
She was? So did she have some financial liability?
Yeah, she did. She had, well, every time we bought a house, it was joint.
So she was equally exposed here.
Right. But she still had the power of attorney, which overpowered me.
Yeah, so she can make decisions. But,
right. However.
So her credit went upside down too.
Well, I'm not quite sure about that. As time went on, which was about 6 or 7 months, she returned.
Well, you declared bankruptcy, right?
Oh, I had to.
Really quick.
Yes.
You were like, all right, I'm walking away from this toxic spill.
Right. So.
And then did that absolve you from that power of attorney bullshit?
Yes. At that
By doing
moment,
that?
Yeah. But the way that came about is that the attorney, and he was right.
I can't afford an attorney. I have no power.
Right. So the attorney, and I have to owe this to Bill, the president of the bank.
You helped him out.
They never showed up.
You turned a bunch of non-performing assets into performing assets.
So, and I think that he was just as much shocked as I was.
I would imagine.
The way this took place. And, but anyway,
all right, go on.
The attorney had said, okay, we're going to go before the judge. But in the meantime, she'd come back to town. And she wanted to have a meeting with me to see if we could work things out. So we had a meeting, and there wasn't any way to work it out as far as I was concerned. She had taken everything I had, and the last thing she was going to take was my time. So I asked her, I said, well, I told her, I said, well, if you've already broke me, you bankrupt me, I can't follow through with anything. So I'm out here just like an infant, still naked and raw. So the last thing you're going to take is my time. So we agreed to disagree, and she went her separate ways. But the judge issued me one vehicle, right? I had a van that I worked out of that was in my construction, and he issued me that. And we had one house that was out here in Crescent, Texas, that he said, okay, the house is not finished, so I'm going to declare that yours in order for you to have a place to live. So I said, well, I appreciate it. So all I walked out of there with was 67 cents in my pocket. And I go down to the truck to leave, and I had a parking ticket. It was $3.50.
Oh my God!
On the dash.
The coup de grace, huh?
Well, on the windshield.
Could this day get any worse?
So I go up.
Holy shit!
I go up to the judge's quarters, and I said, "Is there somebody here that can take care of this parking ticket?"
Talk about a bad day.
That's what he said. You've had a very bad day.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, odds are stacked against you, and you got a $3 parking ticket, right? And I said, yes, sir.
Can you put this onto my defaulted debts?
He said, well, go down there and talk to this receptionist down at the end of the hall, and I'm sure she'll validate that.
Yeah, do you validate parking?
Yeah. And I did. She stamped it for me. And
oh man.
So I went by the house where I was staying, packed up all my clothes because it was in foreclosure now.
Was this the barn?
No.
That you'd been working on?
No, this was.
You didn't finish that barn.
I hadn't finished it.
I see.
So it wasn't near ready. And
so
this
that's a
house
project that didn't get finished.
This house out here, that in Crescent where I live now, hadn't been finished either. So I went by and picked up my clothes because I'd already got the foreclosure notice on the door.
It was that quick, huh?
Oh, yeah. And, well, they issued all that in court, of what I could have and what I couldn't. So I'll go by and pack my clothes up, and I moved to Crescent, Texas.
And so what'd you get to take with you, Don? Clothes?
My clothes.
Did you get any other keepsakes or
there was no
records, memories?
No.
Nothing?
No.
Pictures?
No. I had no pictures that
mementos
that I wanted.
Guitars? Anything?
I didn't have any guitars at that particular point. I was strictly into my carpenter tools.
Were your tools gone?
No, my tools were on the truck that I had.
Okay, so you didn't get the tools.
Yeah, I got the tools. And when Billy showed up, my table saws and everything was on that job. So when the judge said, you need to clear everything out that you have and get it in one spot. So he gave me the right to go back and get my tools and that type of stuff from the barn.
Wow. So that's really all you took with you?
Yeah.
Clothes and your tools.
My clothes and tools. And I moved to Crescent. Then I became a hermit. I didn't want to deal with people.
Well, where do you go from there, Don? I mean,
down.
What do you do?
You go down.
Everything you'd been working on was just pulled out from underneath you.
Yeah.
From one day to the next.
It was like you go to bed tonight and you don't have a worry in the world financially.
Yeah, you're on the upswing. Things are going good.
Right. Going good. Then you wake up the next morning to find out the bankers and you're parking in your driveway out there with everything that you work for is gone.
Yeah, and your wife is in Hawaii with some other guy.
Some other guy. So it was pretty devastating.
Man, that would knock the wind out of any man.
So I became a recluse. I didn't want to talk to nobody. Didn't want to see nobody. My problems had swelled to the point where that I was no longer human. So this is hard.
I imagine, Don. I mean, at this point, you're thinking, do I even have a wife?
No.
What's the point? What am I waking up for tomorrow?
Right. And I lived out there for about 4 years and lived off the land. I shot my food and fished.
Really?
Right. And one day, a great friend came by and he said, I've been looking for you for 3 or 4 years, man. And I stopped and questioned at one of the stores up there, and I knew you lived around here, but I had no earthly idea that where you lived. I knew you was in this area, but there's a guy looking for you. I said, really? There's been a lot of people looking for me. And he said, his name is Johnny Duncan. Are you familiar? I said, I know Duncan. Yeah. He said, he wants to talk to you. And I said, I don't want to talk to nobody. And my hair had grown out. I hadn't shaved for days, you know. I probably looked like a railroad bum and really didn't care. So I told him, I said, well, don't tell him where I'm at because I don't want to deal with it. But Jimmy told him anyway. And so, anyway, the morning that I was going to end it, John and his brother showed up. And he said, man, what the hell is happening? I said, you don't even hear it. Doesn't matter. It is what it is, and that's it. I already had the gun stuck in the back of my jeans, and I was on my way to the tank. And I thought, well, I'll go down there, and nobody will hear it, know it. But I'm done. And Tommy, Johnny's brother, was standing behind me, and he reached and pulled the pistol out of my waistline. He said, what the hell is this? And I said, well, tell you the truth, that's the rest of my life. He said, no, this is not going to happen. He said, I think we need to go to town and get you something to eat. And John's got something he wants to talk to you about. I said, okay, all right. But I still had in mind, when we got through talking, it was done. So we go to Fort Worth, and I think we stopped at the Waffle House.
Yeah, you said it was the Waffle House off 377
Yeah.
and 820.
Yeah.
It's still there.
Yeah, it is. So we stopped there, and I might have had $1, maybe. And we finished breakfast, and Johnny said, I'm going down here to the mall, so let's go down to the mall. So we go down to the mall, and he buys me some clothes. And he wants to go to the hotel. He's rented a hotel room over off of I think it's 35 Beach Street. So we go over there, and he's talking to me about wanting to go back to Nashville. And he wants me to go with him. He said, I'm ready to get back at this, and I want you to take me back. And I think that you can do it. I said, there's a whole lot of people out there a whole lot better shape than I am right now, John. He said, that's not the point. I want you to represent me. And I want you to take me back to Nashville. So after that conversation, My my problems became nil, and his became more important than mine. Because here was a guy I had worked for in the previous years, and I respected him, and he was the type of guy that you could you could trust, and apparently he trusted me. So I said, okay, uh, when do you want to do this? And he said, we're leaving now. You're not going home.
So he was your saving grace, and then down the road, you were his saving grace.
Well, it kind of worked out that way.
It kind of worked out that
Yep.
way. That's the way the
But
universe unfolded. But that's a pretty crazy situation to be in, Don. And the fact that you came through it is really something.
well, it's hard to talk about.
Understandably.
But that was part of Don Miller's life that he wants to forget. Period.
But that was part of. Don't you think that was sort of a trial by fire? That
Oh, I
so
think
since
it
I've
was-
known you, Don, you're a happy guy.
Well-
You've been nothing but positive energy since I've met you,
that was probably the lowest part of my life.
and you came out
So-
on the other side. Would you say stronger, as a stronger human being than before?
I
that?
would have to say more determined on the things that I feel is more important. Now, losing the money, to me, that's probably a blessing.
A blessing.
That's more likely a blessing. But to have turned my life around the way that happened that day when Johnny needed the help, and we took it from that point in his life to where he wasn't homeless, but he had lost everything he had worked all his life for.
So he was in dire straits too.
So sure, he was, and I felt like, okay, I came from a child that was born naked in this world to having something and then losing it all. So I'm right back to a child as far as that goes. But I got a little knowledge, and I know how this works. So you know what? I'm going to get him back. It doesn't matter. My life can wait. Let's get his cooked over. So if we can get his cooked, then my life's going to be better.
And it worked out that way,
It worked
right?
out exactly. But it wasn't. It wasn't an easy chore. And I became more involved in his life, and then he became more involved in my life in the circumstances. And so we was determined we was going to get him back and we was going to do an album. And by God, that's what we did. So what you see over here on this table is, it says Johnny Duncan, the thing to do at the time, right? New songs. In other words, he wanted that put in red letters so that the labels that he had dealt with before couldn't take any part of it. And that the conversation I'd had with one of the producers, that we really didn't need you, right? And so we kind of laughed at Nashville when we cut this album, because they said we couldn't do it. But there it is. So, Nashville, you're great, but you're not that good.
Can't hold back Don Miller.
Well, and Johnny, you can't bash talent. It's gonna stick its ugly head up anyway. So, we accomplished it.
Well, I never knew Obviously, I never knew you until 2021. A year, I think it was 5 or 6 months after my Uncle Don passed away,
Right.
is when I met you over at Harvey's. And man, I didn't know we were going to become best friends. I didn't know that.
Well,
How the hell would I know that? But, after I met you and got to know you, the more we talked, the more, the more I just felt like we were supposed to be friends. And
sure.
who knows why things line up the way they do in the universe. But when you need somebody,
That's the element.
they're put in front of you,
Yep.
And I got to meet you, and I was like, this guy can't be real. He's done all these things. He's shook hands with my hero. He's got all these experiences. Music is his passion. You've encouraged me to keep going, and you gave me the courage to step away from
Well,
things I couldn't stand and make my life better. So, I'm indebted to my Uncle Don. I'm indebted to you, Don Miller. So anybody with the name Don, maybe they're a godsend.
They're kind of yeah, they're back there pushing on you. But it's I've had a great life. It's a pleasure to have you as a friend. I want you to know that. I didn't have any earthly idea you was going to take me back to this depth,
Well,
where I was.
I didn't mean to put you through the ringer,
No, it's
emotional
fine.
ringer, Don.
It's
But
fine.
it's an inspiration to me, knowing that you've gone through such hardship and turned out the way you did. And money isn't everything.
No.
And I think it was Mike Tyson who said, anybody who thinks money is important hasn't lost any before.
Well, that's true. That's true. Money is a tool, and that's all it is. It's no different from my handsaw in my box, right? If you take money and you utilize it, not worship it. I don't mean worship it. I mean use it to help somebody that can advance their life. It advances your life. And I wasn't the only one that was having a hard time at that particular time. Johnny was having a hard time too, right? Because the rug had been pulled out from under him, but in a different way. But nevertheless, when you fall, you fall. It doesn't matter whether it's musical wise or whether it was like what happened to me. But the thing that I think we both realized at that particular time is that, it's more important to have friends than it is
Than money.
the dollar.
By far.
Yeah.
You can't take money with
No.
you.
Well, like I told you before, I came here naked.
It's
So-
the same way we leave.
Right. And we're going to leave that way.
And when you look back on your past, I don't associate or equivocate happiness with how much money was in my bank account.
No.
That's not when I think back of good times. It's not like, well, I remember when I had $70,000
Right.
in my bank account.
Right.
That was the happiest. No,
No.
that has nothing to do with
No.
it at all.
No. I think the gratitude that a person should think about and rely on is good people and good friends.
And making memories along
Yes.
the way
Right.
with those people.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's nothing more important than for somebody to call me up and say, "Hey man, I just want to hang out today." Has nothing to do with money. You couldn't buy that. You can, and I've seen a lot of people with a whole lot more money than I ever thought about having. Was the most miserable humans in the world.
That's right, man.
And that to me, that's not life.
No.
You live within a shell, and you're so afraid of what you've got that somebody else is trying to take it that you have no life. Only thing you're doing is protecting what you think is the greatest thing in the world, which is money. And it's not. The greatest thing in the world is friendship and the love for each other. So and that's when I tried to lean on, is that if I can do something to help you and make you feel better with your life, and I've seen you when you was down, you've seen me when I was down, and if I could say anything to encourage tomorrow being a better day, then that's what I'm all about.
Yeah.
Because I've been at the lows, and I've been at the highs. I like the highs better.
Sure. But you got to remember what Nixon said when he was giving his farewell speech at the White House the day after he resigned. He said you can't ever appreciate the view from the mountaintop until you've been in the lowest of life's valleys. Gives you perspective and gives you a sense of,
I agree with that.
Appreciating the struggle.
Yes.
But money never changed my uncle.
Oh.
Because I saw him and my aunt take things dollar by dollar, and they went from a camper to a fifth wheel, and then when they had enough sales, he bought a trailer and stuck an AC unit in the top and a folding table, and my aunt worked inside and managed the orders inside that trailer, and then he put in overhead fluorescent light. Like, they just went dollar by dollar. It was never, we're gonna get filthy rich. Like, that was never an aspiration of his. And as he made more money, he'd still walk around wearing Dale Earnhardt t-shirts.
Sure. Well, I never did have that drive to be filthy rich.
No, it's such a pointless objective.
It is.
We're so conditioned to think, gotta get rich.
Gotta get rich.
Well, that's the metric of success, is how wealthy you are.
Well,
like
it's not.
You said, people who are rich are miserable.
That's right.
I had a friend growing up in high school who, his parents struck it rich, and I'm not going to say his name, but he never had to do dick in his life.
Right.
He didn't have to try. His whole life was taken care of, had the silver spoon in his mouth. They gave him a bunch of rental homes and said, okay, you manage these. But he would come to me and say how pissed he was because he had no agency to make any decisions.
Wow.
Because they were still pulling the strings.
Right.
Oh, we're going to buy this house. We're going to sell this one. And we don't care what you have to say. He turned to me one day in a guarded moment and said, I envy the hell out of you because you're striking out on your own and doing it all by yourself.
Well, that's important, I mean, from his perspective and what he's looking at you, he envy you for who you are.
Well, here I am driving a Crown Vic, living in a crappy townhouse.
Doesn't matter.
I was driving. He envied me.
Yeah, I was driving that van with a $3 parking ticket on it that I couldn't pay.
Yeah. So money makes no difference.
And I survived it, and thanks to Mr. Duncan and his brother, and a lot of the things that I guess I felt like that I owed to Johnny, because he'd been in my life for several years. He'd paid me a salary every week, which kept me going, and I felt, okay, I owe this guy, even though I did the job when I was there for him. But in his lowest moment,
you were there for him. You turned around and helped him out.
Right. So we were so close.
You were each clutching one another's hand at the abyss, man.
Exactly.
That's very rare that you get to do the same thing for someone else that they did for you,
Well, he always said, well, I'm considered an artist, and I know a lot of people. But he said, you know what? I've come to the decision, if you leave this world having one true friend, then you've accomplished more than most.
You're truly rich.
Right. So I hope he left here knowing that he had a good friend.
Well, certainly, I'm sure he did, man. I'm sure he did.